I want to play a game, but it has to be our game. It has to be our secret. That means that you can't tell anyone that we're playing this game. Not even your friends. Those were the words that he said to me. He first began to touch me around the age of 8. He would touch me in places that were meant to be sacred. I trusted him, and I thought that what he was doing was right. I thought that playing a game with my stepfather was something that all little girls did. But it wasn't until I grew older, after years and years of us playing this game, our game, that I learned I was being molested. I had built a relationship with my stepfather, being that he was present most of my life. My dad is an alcoholic, and he cheated on my mother when I was about 8 months old, which left her to raise me and my 2 sisters alone. My mother was married to my stepfather for about 8 years. Well, at least that's when I stopped counting. As a result, most of my life was spent raised by my molester. It was spent in silence because I had promised to keep this secret. I also didn't want to be blamed for what happened to me. I didn't want to be judged or labeled as hypersexualized, because as a society, we tend to put labels on things that we don't fully understand. Because in our minds, it's easier to classify a situation or person than to have the realization that we're all complex humans. And so I shied away from the idea of people saying that I wanted it to happen. And so I told no one. Just like I didn't tell anyone that I was gay until my freshman year of college. It took a while for me to accept it myself because I wanted so badly to be straight. I would pray every night for God to fix me, to take what I was feeling away. I prayed so much that my prayers had prayers. Growing up, I felt obligated to have a boyfriend because that's what everyone seemed to question me about. I remember at a very young age being questioned by my great aunt and grandmother. It was actually their favorite line, what little boy I was crushing on in class. Other than my great aunt asking how my hammer's hanging, and me still to this day not having a clue what she was talking about, I would say a random name like Jeffrey or Adam, but in reality, my soul was crying out for me to say the girl's name that I would constantly smile at, and she would smile back. And so I went through my adolescent years seeking love from guys because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I knew that if I were to come out and say that I was gay, I would have either been bullied or called an abomination, or both. And so I told no one. We tend to live our lives telling no one our truths. The truths that we've hidden so deep inside of us in hopes that they go away. But still they linger and they haunt us because our truths are a part of who we've become. Our truths have helped to shape our present, and they continue to mold our future. But how did we as a society get away with not living our truths? Daily, we're asked by our peers, colleagues, and family the simple question of how are you doing? And without even thinking, we utter the words, I'm well. But are you really well? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? When is it ever okay to be humble enough to break down and say that life sucks today? We've built outer shells that have allowed us to get away with not being vulnerable. But I would like to think that being vulnerable is what really makes us human. But being vulnerable means that you have to live with yourself. You have to live with your secrets, and you have to accept your mistakes. I've lived with my untold truths for roughly 20 years. And these are just now the truths that I'm willingly open to share. Imagine how many untold truths we carry throughout our lifetime. Imagine how these untold truths affect the generations that come after us. If we shared more of our secrets and experiences with other people, I believe that we could stop making those same mistakes over and over and over again. As adults, we have to be willing to engage in conversations that go beneath the surface. The types of conversations that make you queasy and uncomfortable. The types of conversations that most people avoid. And we have to be willing to have those conversations with our youth so that they aren't taught to live up to our unrealistic ideals of perfection. Shifting the narrative from perfection to truth. Because our youth are already living similar experiences such as mine and yours. And they will continue to do so with them hidden if we don't begin to address the elephant in the room. We have to stop placing the same Band-Aid over various levels of trauma that we all carry through our untold truths. The first step for this paradigm shift to take place is humility. It's accepting that we don't have all of the answers, or that we aren't as perfect as our Facebook and Instagram paint us to be. And we must do so with an open mind and understanding that not everyone is in the same place. Growing up, I didn't know what it meant to be a kid that received free or reduced lunch. I just knew that there was never a day that I would forget my lunch money. But it wasn't until I joined the education sector that I learned that society has already placed a marker of failure on low-income students, and I was one of them. I didn't know growing up that youth of color were not given the same resources as their peers. I didn't know that there were systems and structures still in place that contribute and promote the failures of entire races. But as a very good friend of mine always says, we have to stop looking at our youth of color from a deficit perspective. In 2017, why are we still providing our youth with an education that is structured to prepare them for factory work, but place the blame on them for being disengaged when we're the ones not meeting their needs? I'll ask that question again. In 2017, why are we still providing our youth with an education that prepares them to work in factories, but place the blame on them for receiving D's or dropping out when we are the ones that are failing them? We've skipped the step of building relationships with our youth, and we've placed them into buckets based on their test scores and socioeconomic status. We've projected their entire future in advance before they even step foot into middle school. Our youth, specifically our youth of color, are trying to thrive in environments that are structured for them to fail. Most are trying to navigate in spaces of white privilege. Some are trying to escape the perpetual cycles of poverty. And others just want to feel as if they have a voice that's worth listening to. The way a person looks, their ethnicity, and race is not oftentimes a conversation that we want to have. But we can't truthfully talk about socioeconomic status if we're not talking about race. We can't begin to eliminate sexism, racism, homophobia, or classism if we aren't talking about how they're all interconnected. We can't skip the race conversation and dive into data for solutions on how to cure poverty. Because if you pull back the layers of that data, you will see that all roads lead to your skin tone. So what do we do now that we've witnessed these perpetual cycles for centuries? What do we do for the people that aren't yet ready to accept this as truth? And what do we do for the people that are willing and ready to engage in these conversations but don't know where to start? Well, myself and two seniors, Talik Tillman and Taiwo Damola, created the solution through an idea that has now evolved into a company called Diversity Talks. Diversity Talks fosters a space for adults and youth to have difficult conversations in the classroom. We foster this space by providing student-led professional development to K-12 educators. We incorporate topics such as race, power, privilege, and oppression. We train youth to be able to facilitate these difficult conversations in a space where they spend most of their lives and are greatly impacted. But the realization lies within the fact that even though they spend a great amount of time in the classroom, all of their identities and experiences still have not been represented. Diversity Talks asks adults to relinquish their power by allowing youth to have a seat at the table, an actual seat, not to make decisions for themselves, not just decisions based off of what we project onto them. I knew that I couldn't stand here before you today with untold truths while going out into the world and sharing the mission of Diversity Talks. I couldn't continue to ask adults to reach a level of vulnerability and discomfort if I hadn't done so myself. Today, I ask you to join me in living your truth. Join me by engaging with the next person that you cross paths with. Ask them how their day is going, but instead, wait long enough for a response, pushing them beyond "I'm well" or "it's going well." Join me by having uncomfortable conversations. It is then that we can begin to dismantle systems that aren't equitable. Join Diversity Talks. Thank you.